What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Let's Talk MMA podcast, and I hope you guys are having an amazing day, man. Have you guys been watching the Olympics? It's actually been pretty fun. I've been watching the track and field, some of the boxing events. Crazy to see that Jamaica in the 4x100 relay did not qualify for the finals. In fact, even China beat them. It wasn't because the Jamaican sprinters weren't as fast. Their handoff with the baton was way worse than everybody else up there. Serbia almost defeated the United States in basketball. Yo, I've been hearing a lot about people saying that the European basketball players are actually extremely underrated because everybody believes that the American basketball players are far ahead of everybody else. And watching that basketball game, man, those Europeans are something else, man. What's that one Serbian player everybody's talking about? Nikola Jokic? And then Steph Curry coming back with the three-pointers, man. Save the game for the United States. Oh, Dricus Plessis actually came out with a statement about Sean Strickland. He says that if Sean Strickland is going to wait, he's going to wait for quite a while because he does not owe him a title shot. Very interesting. Wait, he said that it was a clear victory for me. Okay. I don't agree with a clear victory for Dricus. That fight was super close, and most people, it seems like, believe that Sean Strickland won the fight. Him actually saying that is going to get people to want to see the rematch even more. He said the win was very clear. So it looks like if DDP beats Adesanya, he's willing to fight the winner of Whittaker and Khamzat over fighting Sean Strickland. I really wonder how a rematch between Dricus and Whittaker would go, because I'm starting to think that the Whittaker we saw in that fight was not in his best form for some reason. Dricus had an amazing game plan, switching to southpaw, countering him with the jab, right, intercepting that outside head movement. It was a technique that he saw in the Jared Cannonier fight, where he rocked Whittaker with the same punch. So it was a very good, masterfully executed game plan by Dricus Plessis. But at the same time, I don't think a rematch will go like that. I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think Whittaker would actually give Dricus a very hard fight in a rematch. And I could see him win as well. But that's only if Dricus is able to beat Adesanya. Adesanya is gaining some muscle, he's putting weight on his frame, and that striking style of his is not going to be easy for Dricus to fight. Dricus is going to need to take that fight to the ground. He's way too susceptible to counter punches from long range as he tries to cover distance, and Adesanya is the perfect style to beat Dricus in that kind of matchup. But if Dricus can mix up his boxing with his wrestling, the fight gets very difficult for Israel Adesanya. But the fact that Adesanya is bigger, he's gaining muscle, could make his takedown defense actually pretty insane. That gyno has to be pulsing, right? Nah, get out of here, man. There's no way. Bro's about to bully Dricus Plessis. Yo, Dricus, you gotta do something about this guy's size. Get bigger, get faster. Imagine with all that muscle he's gaining, he goes out there to just point fight again. But then again, non-champion Israel Adesanya is actually exciting. It's only when he has the belt where he puts everybody to sleep. And did you guys hear, Belal Muhammad? Well, Belal's just been talking a whole bunch of trash to Kamaru Usman. Like, even though he's not the best trash talker, at least he's bringing a personality to the welterweight division again. Leon was such a bore fest to listen to and watch fight. I mean, at least Belal puts an effort there, you know? And if he's like talking trash to Usman, that gets Usman fired up, it's good for the welterweight division to have a champion that's willing to sell fights compared to one that isn't willing to sell fights. But he went out and said that Islam Makhachev can go up to the middleweight division and beat Dricus Plessis. He actually believes that. And Dricus' response was, Makhachev is dreaming big, and he's also very big. Nah, man, DDP is probably way too big for Islam. Like, Islam is a better fighter, skillfully. Like, he's way more technical in pretty much every aspect of fighting. But DDP has to have like 30 pounds on him. Wait, even Javier Mendez is talking about Islam going up to middleweight? Okay, if Islam beats Arman Tsarukyan, and let's say he gets another big win at lightweight, he wants to win a second belt, but does not want to fight Belal Muhammad, do they give him the opportunity to fight Dricus? Or whoever is the champion at middleweight? That's never been done before. And the weight difference might be too crazy to even consider. But if Islam completely clears out his division, then what do you do with him? If he wants to fight at middleweight, how can they say no at that point if Islam beat everybody else? But that's in the future for Islam Makhachev. He has to still beat Arman, and after that, who's left for Islam? Maybe Mateusz Gamrot? I'm not gonna lie, if it's not Charles Oliveira or Max Holloway going back up to 155 because he should be in the top 5 in that division, if it's not either of those two guys fighting him after Arman, I don't care about any other 155ers' chances against Islam. Okay, so if Islam beats Arman, he beats Oliveira, Max comes up and Islam beats him too, hypothetically, let's just say, give him a middleweight title shot at that point, who cares, right? He'd be regarded as one of the greatest fighters of all time. at that point. You have to give him that opportunity. But until he does something that spectacular, I don't know if you give him a shot at 185. There are a lot of people talking about it now, though. It kind of reminds me when people were talking about Kamaru Usman's chances against Jan Blachowicz when both of them were champions. You guys remember that? And there was a picture they took of each other facing off, and Usman actually looked very big, and that was a bigger size difference than Islam versus Dricus. But here's one reason why they may never do that. There's too much of a risk for their champions. Like, not just the champions actually, even for the division, because if Dricus goes out there and smashes Islam Makhachev, even though it shouldn't, it will knock off a bit of the aura from Islam Makhachev. And on the other hand, if Islam somehow was able to beat Dricus, middleweight will be the laughing stock of MMA for a long time, until like another Anderson Silva comes up or something. I don't even know if Dricus would be willing to fight Islam. Like, what does he win out of it? There's just way too much for him to lose compared to him win. Like, everybody expects him to beat Islam. He's 30 pounds heavier. And if he were to lose, nobody would ever look at Dricus the same again. And any other middleweight at that point. No, but I do think Dricus would be way too big, way too strong. Oh, and it turns out that Robert Whittaker was the one that asked to fight Hamzat at UFC 308. He's the one that called Hamzat out, which I'm very surprised by, because if anyone he would call out, I thought it would be like the champion or Sean Strickland. Perhaps he did ask for Strickland and they may have told him that Strickland doesn't want to fight him. So he's like, okay, let me fight Hamzat then. But the reason why Whittaker wants to fight Hamzat, in his words, is to derail the hype train. Has Whittaker always been this awesome? Like, we've always loved the guy. He's always been amazing, but he's making more BMF moves over the years. It's crazy that he's turned out to be the I'll fight anyone, anytime kind of guy. Oh, and did you guys see this weekend's card? That's really going to test how much of a fan you are of this sport. A blob fight in the main event, Marcin Tybura versus Sergey Spivak. What happened to the heavyweight division, man? It used to be so much better back in like the early 2010s with Kane, JDS, Brock, Uberim, Stipe was coming up. Cormier had a couple fights there. Travis Brown was actually good. Fabricio Verdum, Shane Carwin. Like, heavyweight was so much better back then overall. Right now, like, some of the top heavyweights would beat the best of that day, like John Jones, maybe Tom Aspinall. But if you go top 10 versus top 10, early 2010s versus 2024, 2010s wins. Like, they would win the majority of the fights. Same goes for the middleweight division, same goes with the light heavyweight division. 185, 205, and heavyweight are worse now than they were like 10 years ago. Like, sometimes people tell me, yo, Weasley, you talk a lot about old fighters sometimes, like Fedor and Anderson Silva, Brock and Overeem, whatever, you know, like those older guys. It's because they win, dude. They're just better. Like, there's some good fighters. Dricus is a pretty good fighter. Adesanya, Whittaker is a good fighter. Hamza might be a really good fighter if he proves himself against Whittaker. There's Strickland. Of course, Alex Pereira, Yuri's good. John Jones, Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, and Volkov. But there isn't as many good fighters as there were back then. Like, you look at the middleweight division back in like when Weidman and Rockhold were the champs, you had Weidman, Rockhold, Romero, Jacare, Gegard. Whittaker was coming up. Bisping was reaching his prime. Vitor, Lyoto, and there were so many well-rounded fighters that can both strike and grapple, whereas in the middleweight division today, most of them are strikers. Not too many grapplers there. You look at the light heavyweight division around 2015, you had Prime Jones, DC, Gustafsson, Rumble, who are the four most skilled light heavyweights in history, but you would also have to include Alex Pereira there if you're including Rumble, because I do think Pereira could potentially beat Rumble in a fight, but he wouldn't beat the other three because they can wrestle him for 5 rounds. And they are pretty good strikers too, right? They're not going to just run into big shots from Pereira like that. Rumble, on the other hand, wasn't as technical as they were. He was just so fast and so powerful, and he could knock Pereira out. He could also use his wrestling, but he would gas out before Pereira would. Pereira actually has 5-round cardio, whereas Rumble would sometimes slow down. The best cardio display of Rumble's career, I think, was when he fought Phil Davis. He fought at a really good 3-round pace, throwing power punches, high kicks. I don't know how Phil Davis took all those shots. But yeah, Jones, DC, Gus, Rumble, and Alex Pereira are the best light heavyweights we've ever seen in the sport. And 4 of those guys were around 2015 fighting each other. That's why the light heavyweight division back in 2015 was better than what we got today, right? They would mostly wash the best of 2024's light heavyweight division. So whenever you hear someone say that the older fighters are not as good as today, they're mainly talking about welterweight to bantamweight, because that's not true from middleweight to heavyweight. They were better before. And even the flyweight division, it's an argument where maybe Demetrius Johnson's era was better than today, or even the Figgy and Moreno rivalry that era may have been the best the flyweight division has ever been. The only thing about the welterweight division is that GSP is the best welterweight we've ever seen. The other guys in that era, though, would not stack up to the welterweights today. Only GSP would, right? Nick Diaz would get absolutely dominated by some of these guys. Carlos Condit would as well. I mean, can you imagine what Belal Muhammad would do to Carlos Condit? If he's taking out Leon Edwards like that, slamming him on his head, Carlos Condit is just fish bait. He's absolutely just meat to Belal Muhammad, or anybody that can wrestle for that matter today. Like even Shavkat, I think Leon would out-wrestle him. And Condit back then was one of the best welterweights in the world. You had Robbie Lawler. He would be a difficult fight in his prime, but he was after GSP, right? I mean, like Dan Hardy, Thiago Alves, Jake Shields, BJ Penn. They were very good for their day, but welterweight has evolved past most of them. These guys are completely outclassed by today's welterweights. But yeah, that Tabor and Spivak card, which was the main point of this topic before I went on that detour, could be much, much better. That got announced is in the PFL. Francis Ngannou is officially back in MMA. On October 19th, he's fighting Renan Ferreira for the heavyweight title. Two massive heavyweights, man. Huge knockout power. Absolutely one of them is getting knocked out. Renan Ferreira is the biggest man Francis Ngannou's ever fought in MMA. The only guy that's bigger than him was Tyson Fury. And not even by much, I think. Renan Ferreira is 6'8", 261 pounds with an 85-inch reach. He's bigger than Ngannou is. Ngannou, I think, is 38 years old now. Got knocked out for the first time in his career, and it was a horrendous knockout loss, like dropped 3 times, and at that age, who knows what his chin is going to be like. But not only that, we've seen Ngannou react to losses before. When he lost to Stipe, remember when he came back against Derek Lewis and he just looked very, very timid on the feet, didn't really fight him that well? We could get another timid Francis Ngannou in front of someone like Renan Ferreira, who's absolutely hungry to finally beat him. And on top of that, Ngannou's already made generational wealth. He's so incredibly rich. He's made so much money in boxing, and he's going to make a lot of money in this fight with Ferreira because remember his deal with the PFL. He's getting millions of dollars from this fight. He might not be as hungry as he used to be, because remember who Ngannou was when he came into the sport. He was pretty much homeless. Like, he had nothing. He came from Cameroon, went to France, trying to find a way to make a living, chase his dreams as well, and he did chase his dreams. He went into boxing. He fought some of the best fighters there, nearly beat one of them, lost to the other. He lived out his dreams of being a professional boxer against some of the best in the world. He's so incredibly rich, he never has to work again, and neither does his family. What's left for him? Just passion? Is passion all that's left for him? But does he even have that passion anymore? Does he want to keep fighting? A guy who has that kind of background and has succeeded so much in all of his goals, I don't know if Ngannou has that passion and fire under him to get this win like he used to have. Renan Ferreira is absolutely hungry. Like, this guy has everything to fight for. So I honestly would not be surprised at all if Renan Ferreira knocked Ngannou out or at least beat him in this fight. Most of fighting is mental, and I think Ferreira is going to have the mental advantage going into it. He's going to have the confidence advantage as well, and he's going to be the hungrier fighter. That alone is going to be very hard for Ngannou to beat. That's a very interesting fight for the PFL. I hope Ngannou wins, man. Prayers to him and his family and his son, of course. So we know that Muhammad Mokaev wasn't re-signed to the UFC, and Dana said a lot of things about him. He didn't like Mokaev and probably the stuff he did behind the scenes. Steve Erceg even came out and said that Mokaev is very rude to the staff. He tried to fight Kep multiple times before their scheduled bout. According to a few people, Mokaev is just not the easiest guy to deal with. But now he just got denied by the PFL, or the PFL executive said that Mokaev is too much of a pain to work with, so he doesn't care about signing him. So the two top organizations in the world do not want Mokaev, which means, does he just go to one championship? In fact, I would say that's the best place for Mokaev to go to, now that he's not with the UFC, because Demetrius Johnson is over there at 1. He's the champion of the 135-pound division. Mokaev would be at 135 over there. They don't have a flyweight weight class, and everyone just bumps up to the next weight class compared to the other orgs. So Mokaev would be a 135er, and he has the chance on fighting Demetrius Johnson, the greatest flyweight of all time, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and in fact, that would probably be a bigger fight for him than any other fight in the world. So if I was Mokaev, I'd probably go for one championship on the opportunity on beating Demetrius Johnson. The only thing is, DJ's very inactive. Like, he's fought a couple times in the past few years, and I don't even know if it's him, because I haven't heard much about the other one fights outside of Demetrius, you know? He fought once in 2023 against Adriano Moraes, once in 2022 against Moraes again, won once in 2021, also against Moraes, no fights in 2020, and he had 3 fights in 2019. A very inactive record right there for Demetrius there, right? DJ's up there in age a bit. He's still one of the best in the world. He could even be regarded as the best flyweight right now, but I have no idea if he's going to fight long enough to go up against someone like Mokaev. If Mokaev gets a few wins over there and one, will DJ take up that fight in time? Will there be enough time for both of them to fight each other before DJ retires? That should be the goal of Mokaev right now, is to get that fight with Demetrius, try to beat him and make a bigger name of himself, and then maybe in the future try to sign back with the UFC if they want him. Change his ways, that's the biggest thing as well. If he is that hard to handle, if he is rude to the staff and not getting along with people, he's got to change a bit, man. That attitude is just not going to work for him. So the only thing at this point that he can work with, if he's not going to fix his attitude up, go to 1 and beat DJ. That's the main thing he could do at this point to get back to the UFC. I mean, it's a shame because he's 23 years old, very young, he's undefeated. He also had a long amateur career as well. I don't care for his style, but like, he is going out there and winning. And the guy is growing, right? He's physically going to get bigger. He's going to get better with his skills. Maybe in the future he gets more exciting. We've seen other fighters in the past, they were boring coming up and then they became exciting once they got the belt and beat the other best fighters in the world. Like, for example, Kamaru Usman. Usman was very boring before he became a champion. Remember 30% Usman? Once he became a champion, he was one of the most exciting welterweights out there. Or like Islam Makhachev, wasn't the most exciting guy coming up, but once he became the champ, just bangers after bangers. And hopefully Mokaev could do something quite similar, right? Because right now his fighting style is tucking in his opponent to sleep and putting the rest of the audience to sleep with him. And let's go to the questions, and we're going to start with YMD. Aspinall wants a 4-man tournament and Dana doesn't. But isn't this exactly what should happen? Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, man. And yeah, a tournament could work, but you have to know that Jon Jones, if they all go into a room with him, none of them are leaving. Jon Jones is the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world. He's the greatest to ever do it. And you ask what would happen? Jon Jones would happen. No, but for real, in a 4-man tournament, I would say that Tom Aspinall would probably win that. Against Jon Jones, who else did he say? Stipe and Curtis Blades? Yeah, Tom Aspinall is the best of the 4, and he's the most dangerous of the 4, able to knock them out or submit them. He's so incredibly well-rounded. It's insane how good he is for a heavyweight. Then we go to Nick Beatty. You the man, Weasel. Thank you so much, man. 2 questions. I just saw that MMAJunkie has Max off of the pound for pound list, while Usman, Sean Strickland, and Aljo are still in. How is that even remotely acceptable? Also, any plans for more incentives to be a Weasel member? Extra content or anything, regardless. Love you, homie. Your channel has helped me through a lot of hard times. My man, I'm happy for you and very grateful to help you out, brother. Just keep pushing, man. I will be doing member streams, and those are going to be before I go public with streams. So I can actually do a member stream even tomorrow, if you guys like that. So I'm going to ask the members what you guys want for any additional content. But I do think streaming would probably be the biggest thing for you guys. But according to your question here, Max is not on the pound for pound list while Usman, Strickland, and Aljo are. Is that remotely acceptable? As long as they got Jon Jones at #1, that's the best pound for pound list you can ever have. Did I ever mention how Jon Jones went up to the heavyweight division and defeated Cyril Gane? The greatest to ever do it. No, but that makes no sense. Max should be above Usman, Strickland, and Aljo, considering his recent record. I mean, defeating really good fighters, went up to the lightweight division, beat Justin Gaethje. He should be higher in the lightweight rankings, not just pound for pound. Now he's fighting Topuria. Like, to not have Max on the pound for pound list, but Usman, Strickland, and Aljo are in there is insanity. They absolutely have to have Max in there, and not only top 15, but at least in the top 10. They would have Kamikaze. Hi Weasel, love the content. Belal just beat Leon, and we all lost money, and he says he doesn't want to go up. Instead, he wants to take GSP spot as the welterweight GOAT. According to his press conference, beating Shavkat, Ian, JDM, and Usman will put him there. What do you think? Also, how do you think he matches up against those 4 and Islam if Islam moves up? P.S. He broke 2 curses with that victory. 35 years old as champ, and the John Anik curse. Belal versus Shavkat. I think Shavkat wins, but it is a competitive fight for sure. I've talked about it before. I think Shavkat's striking would be a bit of a difference maker on who wins that fight. Belal will be able to wrestle with him a bit, but we just don't know how good Shavkat's takedown defense is or how good he is on the ground on his back. For Ian Gary, I think Belal wrestles him into a decision. JDM, same thing. I think he outworks Usman. Prime Usman would have been a very interesting fight, but an older out of his prime Usman, I think Belal would beat him. And then for Islam Makhachev, I think Islam beats him. I mean, in fact, Belal even said in the training room that Islam gets the better of him. I think Islam is a better wrestler. I think he's a better grappler on the ground. I think he's a way better striker. The only thing Belal has against him is the strength, but I think Islam at 170 is going to be very, very strong. So Islam probably beats him in most areas of the game, and that's why he is the number 1 pound for pound fighter. Then we go to Troy Hartung. Couple of questions about Paddy. How would you compare his pure grappling skills versus Oliveira's and Islam's? Is he just as dangerous as they are on the ground? Why or why not? It's hard to tell because he hasn't gone against the same level of competition that Oliveira and Islam did, but it does look like his submission ability is very, very high level. I've always thought that as well. He's always had amazing submissions. But how does he do it against a guy who can wrestle? He has a good base, landing ground and pound, landing elbows, like an Armin Saryukian kind of fighter. And how does he go up against another really good submission artist, like an Oliveira? I think a fight with like Thiago Moises would be an interesting one with him, or Renato Moicano. That would really test on where Paddy Pimblett's grappling is really at. And then if he continues to win in exciting fashion like he did against Bobby Green and becomes a legit title contender, do you think he'll become the next big pay-per-view star in the UFC? If not, then why? He would never become a pay-per-view star like John Jones. No, I'm kidding. If he keeps beating opponents like how he beat Bobby Green, submitting them very quickly like that, then yes, he will become a big pay-per-view star. What does he need to prioritize improving first in his skill set if he wants to fight for the title one day? His boxing, takedown attempts, cardio, or something else? Absolutely his boxing. And I think his offensive wrestling. Most of these jiu-jitsu guys don't have good wrestling to take the fight to where they're at their best and most dangerous. Paddy Pimblett should focus on boxing defense and wrestling offense. Those are the two big things for him. And then with Mike Griffith. Great content, keep up the good work. Thank you so much, man. Name one fighter from any of these following weight classes that you think would beat Khabib. 145 division. None of them. In their prime, maybe Jose Aldo stylistically would have the best chance of beating Khabib, but I don't think any of them are big enough to handle Khabib's style and his size. The 155 pound division, the only fighter that could beat him is Islam Makhachev. And then the 170 pound division, I think a prime Usman would be a very difficult fight. I think Shavkat could be a very difficult fight. Prime GSP, prime Robbie Lawler would be an interesting one. And that's pretty much it. Me, for example, in the 145 weight class, I think Ilia Topuria would beat him. I would disagree with that. I don't think he's big enough. I don't think he would stop the wrestling either. Like, he has very good grappling, except the size difference will be apparent. I mean, Ilia Topuria was just so much smaller than Jai Herbert. He almost got knocked out. It was a while ago, but it was against a guy who isn't really that great of a 155er, right? The 155 standards is very high, and Jai Herbert is just not one of the best guys there. In the 155 division, prime Tony Ferguson beats him. Prime Ferguson, not the Ferguson we got today. I don't think he beats him, but prime Tony would be an interesting fight for sure. I think the only time whenever they got matched up with each other that Tony could have beaten Khabib was the first time. Khabib just got way too good. Like, compare the Khabib that fought Pat Healy and RDA and Abel Trujillo to the Khabib that fought Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. Oh, worlds of a difference. He was way worse back then. And then after the RDA fight was when he was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson for the first time. And I think that version of Tony and that version of Khabib was the only time Tony would have beaten him. Every other time would have been a competitive fight, but I would lean to Khabib. And then you say in the 170 pound division, prime Kamaru Usman beats him. Yeah, Kamaru Usman is a very tough fight for Khabib. And then your second question, after seeing Masvidal's performance against Diaz, do you think Masvidal beats Conor McGregor in a boxing fight? I don't know. Today, probably. Maybe Conor's been so inactive. He's a better striker than Masvidal. Prime versus prime, he has better boxing too. But it's hard to know of what Conor looks like today. We haven't seen him compete in a long time. Hey Weasel, hope you and your family are good. Thank you so much, man. Yours too. What are Shavkat's chances for losing to Belal? I would say like 40 to 45%. Tom's 4-man tournament, I talked about that before. I think Tom would win. What do you think of the Mokaev situation? Talked about that earlier. What next for Pantoja? Maybe fight Royval again. I mean, he's beaten so many of these guys already. Where's Albazi? Like, he should be close to fighting for the title. He needs one more win, I think. I guess give him Royval or something. Or the winner of Kai Kara-France and Steve Erceg. Do you think TJ was on the sauce all of his career? Especially when he won the belt the first time? Probably. I can't say for certain. But with the rumors that Cody was saying, that TJ taught him all how to use steroids, and he popped for EPO when he went down to 125, and now he looks like Chad Mendez while retired, I wouldn't be surprised if he was on something when he won the belt. But Renan Barão may have been as well. So this is before USADA. Renan Barão was so big for the weight class. Who knows what was going on in both those guys' anatomies before USADA came around. What do you think of the Olympic boxer situation? Thank you for all the content. This podcast could be 2 hours and I would be pumped to hear it. Thank you so much, man. My opinion on the Imane Khelif situation. Well, I think it's pretty simple. Show the paperwork. They just got to show the evidence. It's a lot of back and forth without any evidence. So, and Khelif is not trans, right? That's what they said. So it has nothing to do with being transgender. It's all about the chromosomes and what Khelif was born with. But the bigger issue of all of this are the people behind it all. So the IOC and the IBA are both insanely corrupt, allegedly. The IOC is the International Olympic Committee, the greediest organization in the world. The IBA is the International Boxing Association, which is the head of a lot of the amateur boxing scene, which, as we know, amateur boxing is one of the most corrupt sports in the world as well. Why don't they come out there and release the test results instead of playing this back and forth divorce game that they have? Like they were married with each other back in 2017, 2019. And I'm pretty sure the IOC loves all of the exposure and all of the headlines and views that they're getting about this stuff. Again, they are the greediest organization in the world, allegedly. Again, the Olympics makes billions of dollars. And then you ask yourself, how much of that do the athletes see? And a lot of this corrupted allegations between the two falls on a guy named Wu Qingguo from China, who was like the president of the IBA or something. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on under his watch. He was forced to resign in 2017. The IOC eventually suspended the IBA in 2019, but they kept this guy on their board until 2020. After the 2017 craziness that was going on, and even during the 2016 Olympics, why did the IOC hold on to this guy for 3 years after? He was also trying to become the president of the IOC when he was in charge of the IBA. That is very, very shady. The new president or the leader of the IBA is a Russian businessman who was taking like sponsorship deals with companies that had something to do with the conflict with Ukraine and Russia and stuff. It was like, it's a whole thing, man. I don't trust these two organizations, man. They're super shady. It's crazy seeing how people are siding with the IOC. Like, brother, do you know what the International Olympic Committee is all about? People are so uninformed on what's going on with these sports organizations, man. I literally see people like taking their side as if the IOC is telling gospel. It's crazy. With the IBA, it looks like a lot of people agree. Yeah, they do seem kind of shady. But so do the IOC. They're just going off scot-free, maybe because they just have more money. Now, here's the thing. The biggest argument against Khelif is what happened at the CAS when Khelif tried to appeal the disqualification in 2023 from the IBA. So the CAS is the Court of Arbitration of Sport. They pretty much handle any kind of dispute between athletes and organizations. So after the IBA disqualified Khelif because of the gender eligibility test, Khelif appealed that decision to the CAS, but then withdrew it. That is confusing. Why did Khelif appeal and then withdraw it? And the CES is not like siding with the IBA. They're actually the ones that saw the IBA as a corrupted organization when the IOC suspended them. It was in front of the CES. So it's not like they're taking sides of the IBA. They pretty much destroyed the IBA in court or with their decision. They found that the IBA was financially corrupted. But at the same time, Khelif went in front of them, went in court, appealed the disqualification, but then withdrew it. When it seems pretty simple to prove whether the IBA was correct or not, if Khelif just takes another test to show the chromosomes, right? If it's XY or XX. That is the biggest argument against Khelif, and I wish Imane Khelif came out and said why the withdrawing of the appeal happened, when it seems to be quite simple as to prove or disprove the IBA's gender eligibility test. I think it's a cotton swab in the mouth. Is that all it is? And then you get to see like the test results of the chromosomes, right? And you show that to the CES. They look at the results and then they dictate whether the IBA was rightful in disqualifying Imane Khelif or not. So when it comes to Imane Khelif, other than showing the lab work or whatever it is, I don't know what else they should do. And then we go to the worst box. Is 125 cooked in the next 2 years? Yeah, 125 is kind of cooked. Pantoja has beaten like most of the guys in the top 10. He might jump up to 135 soon. And it would make sense if he does it. And it would make sense, especially if he beats Erceg more convincingly in a rematch. If he beats Erceg, jump up to 135. There's nothing left for him at 125. Maybe Albazi, but the guy seems like he's never coming back. Man, that Figgy and Moreno rivalry era was just so good. It was the best time for 125, at least the most exciting. Then we get to ARR. Do you think Alexander Volkov is being overlooked in the heavyweight division? He seems to be hitting a second win in his career. He has been overlooked. I don't think he is anymore. With that performance against Sergey Pavlovich, I think everybody knows this guy's very, very good. And not just good for the current heavyweight division, but just heavyweight standards. He's a good, skilled striker, technical, intelligent, and is only getting better as well. He's not one of these long, tall guys that has a reach that he doesn't know how to use. He uses his reach very well, precise with his punches, has a very good front kick, developing better takedown defense. Alexander Volkov has proven to be one of the best heavyweights in the world. Beating Sergey Pavlovich like that is not easy, and Volkov made it look easy. Then with the Mr. Toad Gaming, would you rather have Raul Rosas' face or Raul's voice? Bro, you asked Bedtime this too? Certainly his voice. Who says Chi Wee Wee's as good as he does? Bro could just come up with his own like sayings and quotes. But do you know what Raul will never get? The #1 pound for pound ranking like John Jones. The greatest of all time. He makes goat sounds. Who cares about Raul's voice? No, I'm just kidding. They're with the Yoel Castro. With Mokaev looking like he's gonna get cut from the UFC or not resigned, makes me wonder who's a fighter you wish the UFC had kept instead of letting them walk away for nothing. Sam Alvey, man. Why did they let go of Sam Alvey? No, I'm kidding. I mean, Gegard, I think they wanted him back, but he went to Bellator. I wish they were able to keep him. He was in the prime of his career, about to get a title shot off of a big win streak. A fight between him and Whittaker would have been so good too. Demetrius Johnson is of course an obvious answer for that, but they traded him for Ben Askren. In the long run, it probably wasn't the best move, but short term it was a good move because they built Jorge Masvidal. If Ben Askren never came to the UFC, Jorge probably never would have been a big star, and they sold over 1 million pay-per-view buys between Jorge and Usman. Then we go to Kenny Yuen. What is the low level of urgency and hunger with recent MMA? So many fighters are so timid and never go all out, even if they are losing the fight. I don't understand. There's so many of them too. High-level fighters like Leon, Cheeto, sometimes Peter Yan. Perhaps we're losing the actual fighters of the sport and they're more the technicians and athletes now. Maybe that's what it is. Say what you want about the plodding, flat-footed, untechnical old bar brawlers were like 20 years ago, but those were fighters, man. Those guys would show an immense killer instinct, go for the knockout. If they saw the opponent hurt, it was like a wolf hunting a limping rabbit or something, you know? That killer instinct is not as common in the sport anymore, as it's turned into more of a sport. The fighters become a lot more technical, they're a lot more athletic, the fighters are more intelligent, but they don't have like that metal inside of them, you know what I'm saying? Like that warrior spirit like those other guys used to. You know, that's not to say all of them are like that. You know, we got Yuri Prohaska, we got Alex Pereira, we got Tom Aspinall, Islam Makhachev, Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier. Like there are guys who will go for the finish if they see that their opponent's hurt. But proportionally, we got way more fighters than before that just don't have that killer instinct, and they're champions, top contenders and stuff. Like what was going on with Corey Sandhagen when he fought Umar? There was a point in Corey's career where he said he made the transition where he just wanted to knock all of his opponents out. It was after he lost, I think, to Aljamain Sterling, where he talked about it. He was way too much of a technician before he fought Aljo, and then after he lost to Aljo, he had to just knock these guys out, which is kind of similar to what you heard about Jorge Masvidal, where Jorge was that technical guy who had to make that switch to just KO his opponents. But then after Corey lost to Peter Yan, he reverted back to his technical ways but added wrestling. If you're able to switch on and off that warrior mentality, the killer instinct, it's just not natural for them. When you watch guys back in the day like Vanderlei Silva and Chuck Liddell and Shogun Rua and Dan Henderson, like those guys were savages. They weren't the most technical guys in the world, but you knew what kind of fight they were bringing into the cage. At any moment the opponent's hurt, they're jumping on that knockout. Or if they're losing a fight, with every ounce of their being, they're going to try to come back and get that win. Watch Henderson versus Shogun. Those guys were hungry and persevered, knocking each other around in that cage. Whereas today it's like, I'm winning, I'm losing. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing because it's technically what I've been drilling in the training room for many, many years, so I'm not going to change that. These guys don't dig deep when they're losing on the scorecards. And it's super frustrating because these guys are better fighters than they were back then, for the majority of them at least. And it's not something that we can bring out of a fighter. It's something that's in them. So like fighters, some of them just don't have the urgency when they're the nail in the fight. They have to be the hammer in order to win it, or to dominate the opponent, or at least cruise to a decision. It's some kind of comfortability that they have, and they're not able to get out of that. They fight one specific style without any deviation. And it could be because they're so used to the training and they cannot change that from their fights. Perhaps they got knocked out in sparring once and they just completely changed their aggression from a fight. It's hard to know why some fighters fight so timid when they are losing on the scorecards. Then we go to the next question. People give Islam stick and play down his win for beating a 145er in Volk in his prime twice by saying he's just a 145er, and they say that's what he's supposed to do because he's bigger, but they never use that argument when Max moved up and KO'd Gaethje, or when Conor moved up to TKO Eddie, the same with GSP moving up to choke out Bisping, or when DC moved up to KO Stipe. So should Islam get more for his win over a pound for pound #1 fighter in the world at the time? I think most people give Islam credit for being Volk. There are some arguments that people will make that Volk was just smaller, and of course Islam was supposed to beat him. But that narrative was in fact a thing even before the fight happened. People believe Islam was just going to be too big and too good for Volk, but it turned out to be a competitive fight. And I think that's a bit of evidence as to why Volkanovski beating him at least is a big victory for Islam Makhachev. And now seeing everything else Islam is doing, beating Dustin, beating Oliveira, #1 pound for pound fighter in the world, it doesn't show that Islam is worse than we thought for having a competitive fight with Volk. Islam is amazing. It goes to show that Volk was better than we even thought he was when he made it a competitive fight with Islam, making the win against Volk bigger than what most people think. And also, wasn't it true that Volk and Islam weighed nearly the same in the cage when they fought each other the first time? Of course, Islam is the naturally bigger fighter, but the win was very, very big. Comparing it to like Max going up against Justin Gaethje, now most of us did think that Max was a bit too small for Gaethje, but not because he was just smaller, but also because we saw him go up to 155 before and he lost to Dustin Poirier. That was actually, I think, a bigger reason why people didn't believe in Max Holloway going up against Gaethje than him just being smaller. Because if you remember, when Max fought Dustin, do you guys remember who the favorite was? Max was a 2-1 favorite against Dustin Poirier going up to 155. So the main reason why people believed that Max was going to have a harder time with Gaethje was because we seen him fight against Dustin where people favored him to win. He lost and it looked like the size was the difference there. But now that he went up and beat Gaethje, it goes to show, okay, maybe it's not that Max was just smaller. He just lost to the better guy and maybe didn't prepare himself to go up to 155 as good as he should have. Volk looked like he was good to go up to 155. In fact, he prepped for it. He talked about it. If a fighter preps the right way to go up to the next weight class, they're most likely going to perform very well if they are a high-level fighter. Conor going up to 155 against Eddie. GSP going up to 185 against Bisping. DC going up to heavyweight against Stipe. They all did it the right way, and so did Volkanovski. It doesn't take away the fact that those guys were bigger, but there is a level of preparation that we have to give credit to these guys going up, that they aren't just a smaller guy who's more vulnerable and all that stuff. They're still one of the best fighters in the world who are bigger than what they were in their original weight classes. At the end of the day, it's a great win for Islam, and Volk looked very good going up as well. He still gave Islam his hardest fight in his entire career other than losing to Adriano Martins. The fact that Dustin and Oliveira could not do that to Islam goes to show you how good Volk is. Then we go to Mike. How would a fight between Ngannou and Aspinall go down if they fought right now? John Jones would beat both Ngannou and Aspinall in the same night with one hand tied behind his back. And he would even need to take it to the ground. That's how good John Jones is. Pound for pound, #1. And who is this Ngannou guy? Isn't that the same guy who got knocked out by Anthony Joshua? Do you know what John Jones would do to Anthony Joshua? There's a reason why he's the baddest man on the planet and Anthony Joshua isn't. Did I ever tell you about John Jones's steroid collection? It's something else, man. I'm just kidding. Ngannou versus Aspinall. That's a hard fight to predict because even though Aspinall is the faster fighter, he's more technical, more skilled overall, one shot from Ngannou could potentially put him out. He did take a big shot from Sergey well, but the fact that he leaves his chin up in the air like that, he can get knocked out at any moment. Ngannou's power is just different. But up until that point, Aspinall would be schooling Ngannou 100%. I don't know who would win, but I think Aspinall would clip Ngannou multiple times, and Ngannou's only chance is to find that raised chin and land something. But ultimately, I probably would have to go with the more skilled fighter here, the faster fighter, and that's Aspinall. But that fight's so hard to predict. They went to Yoel Castro. Which of these fighters will end up having the worst legacy in the future? Tony Ferguson from 12 wins in a row to 7 straight losses, now 8 straight losses. #2, Colby Covington. The story of almost 3 title fights but failing at all of them, being called the second best in his career. #3, Tyron Woodley, from undisputed welterweight champ to 4 straight UFC losses and being knocked out by a YouTuber. And then #4, Alexander Gustafsson, almost beating both DC and Jones, but never getting on the mountaintop, ending his career getting finished 4 times in a row. I would say it would probably be either Gustafsson or Colby. They don't have any kind of record or something to go off like Tony's 12 win streak. Tony losing 8 in a row is crazy, but he was known at one point as the best lightweight in the world, at the time holding the longest win streak in lightweight history, and was the interim champion. There's a lot of positives in Tony Ferguson's career. Colby, on the other hand, he was always like the second best when he was in his prime, which is still very good. Like, being second best is better than most. So I don't know if actually it is Colby. Gustafsson, though, a lot of people don't remember, he was the second best for a few years until DC beat him. So I think maybe Gustafsson, out of these 4 fighters, would have the worst legacy out of them. He almost beat DC, he almost beat Jones, but then after, losing multiple times in a row, never looking like he was back in his prime form, even though he wasn't old when he was losing to like Nikita Krylov and stuff, especially for a light heavyweight. The best things he ever did was almost beating DC and Jones. So him and Colby are actually quite similar. I wouldn't call Tyron Woodley or Tony Ferguson having the worst legacies of these four fighters, considering how much they achieved and not just got close. Colby, though, was the interim champ at one point, so maybe he's above Gustafsson, perhaps. But the thing is, some of Gustafsson's wins aged very, very well, like him beating Glover Teixeira, him beating Jan Blachowicz. Those are very, very good wins, so it's either Gustafsson or it's Colby. But either way, all four of these guys had great legacies. I mean, to be called the second best for Colby Covington for most of his career is crazy, right? That's a very high accomplishment, especially that the best guy was Usman, who's the second greatest welterweight of all time. And then for Gustafsson, I mean, he almost beat Jones and DC. He beat Glover, he beat Jan, he beat Shogun, he beat other good fighters throughout his career, like Jimmy Manuel was pretty decent at the time. All amazing fighters, man. Then with the Liam J. Plince, generally who bests Aspinall in the next 5 or so years? There's obviously a chance of him getting caught, but out of everyone right now, past and present, I favor Aspinall to win more times out of 10 than any other heavyweight. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. What has Tom Aspinall done that John Jones has not? Oh, Aspinall defended the interim belt. It's an interim belt at the end of the day. And John Jones defended the light heavyweight title 32 consecutive times. He's 29-0 and is going to fight the greatest heavyweight of all time. Who bests Aspinall? What kind of question is that? Once Aspinall gets a few more wins, then maybe he could fight the great GOAT, President, King, Emperor John Jones. But I don't think anybody beats Aspinall, to be honest. Out of any heavyweight in history, if they fought 10 times, I think Aspinall would beat any of them, more times out of 10. I think the main way that Aspinall will lose some of those fights is the fact that he does keep his chin up in the air. Can you, imagine that? The main way that these heavyweights can beat Aspinall is that Aspinall keeps his chin a bit too high. That's the main way these guys beat him, and it's something that he can fix very quickly. Once he fixes that, how do these guys beat Aspinall? He has great boxing, he has good kicks, some of the best footwork, he's faster than all of them, he's bigger than most of them, he hits harder than most of them, good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu. Where do these guys beat Aspinall if he lowers that chin a little bit? He may be the best heavyweight we've ever seen in the sport. Then with the Kenny Yuen, are you shocked Dana didn't call Trump a kid when introducing him? Do you know why Trump wasn't called a kid? Because John Jones is going to be his new vice president, but they have JD Vance. It doesn't matter. JD Vance and John Jones are going to go into a room together, and one of them is going to come out as vice president. You know who that's going to be? John Bones Jones, the greatest of all time. Can you imagine JD Vance fighting John Jones? Look at the gusset. If Tony Ferguson had actually been upgraded to Undisputed Champ like he deserved, do you think he would have retired before it getting to this point? Personally, I feel the only reason he hangs on so stubbornly is because he never got the chance to beat Undisputed and, of course, not fighting Khabib. Perhaps he could have retired earlier because Tony Ferguson always said that he doesn't fight for money. He fights for competition. And if he beat Khabib, hypothetically, and won the Undisputed title, he would have accomplished the main competitive goal of the sport, while also having the longest win streak in lightweight history. There'd be no reason for him to continue fighting that much longer. I think if he beat Khabib, the furthest he would go is to fight Conor, and that's where he would retire. And it makes sense, he probably is hanging on with fighting because he didn't accomplish the main goal competitively that he always had, which is actually very sad because he deserved to fight for the Undisputed title at some point in his career. They went to Accursed Hawk. Why does Dana still employ Tony at this point? If any other fighter on the roster lost 8 fights in a row, let alone even 5 to 6, they would get cut at the press conference. I get it's probably a respect thing, but we're talking about a guy who basically forced his best friend, Chuck, into retirement. I don't know what it is. Tony's a legend. He's had an insane career full of exciting fights. Other than that, I don't know why they would keep him fighting. I mean, Dana did just say that he doesn't want Tony to fight anymore, but perhaps Tony's still able to sell fights. Maybe he is still a big enough of a name for them to keep him around. But as you said, Chuck went into retirement, and Chuck was a bigger name than Tony was. I really don't know why they would keep Tony fighting, other than just respecting him for being a legend. We'll do a couple more questions. Yoel Castro, people really like your questions. Would you rather get brutally finished in the first round of a title fight or get obliterated and outclassed over 5 rounds? I would definitely rather get the first round finish, because if a fighter gets brutally finished in the first round, they can cope with it, believing that they still are the better fighter. But if you get outclassed and obliterated over 5 rounds, there's nothing you can say. You got destroyed, dude. You had every chance to get back into the fight and you just couldn't. They proved they were not only destroying you, but they're just a better fighter than you are. And you know who that's never happened to? John Jones. I'm kidding. We go to McMally Nurmagomedov. Do you fight better drunk or high? Definitely high. Most people cannot fight drunk. They are horrible. They have no balance, no speed, no hand-eye coordination. If you're high, though, you could still fight pretty well. Like Nick Diaz beat Takanori Gomi with a Gogo Plata when he was blazed out of his mind. But then again, do you guys remember GSP's coach that he brought on The Ultimate Fighter that one time? The guy just showed up drunk and beat everybody up in the training room. But I do think that fighting high is better than fighting drunk. What's better than fighting high? Fighting drunk and high. And do you know who's done that? John Jones. No, I'm kidding. He never did that, right? Better than both is fighting sober. Don't do drugs. Don't drink like that. And that's the end of the episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to give it a like. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And I'll see you guys in the next video.